Hello, I am going to call the Diversion Board of Authority meeting to order. It is May 23rd, 2024, 3:30 p.m. I'm Board Chair Mayor Shelby Carlson. Don, could we get a roll call, please?
Mayor Carlson.
Here.
Mayor Dardis. Mayor Mahoney.
Here.
Mr. Peterson.
I'm here.
Mr. Hendrickson.
Here.
Mr. Pepcorn. Mr. Ebbinger.
Here.
Mr. Strand.
Here.
Mr. Campbell.
Here.
Mrs. Sherling.
Here.
Mr. Grimberg.
Here.
Mr. Olson. Mr. Selgerbold.
Here.
Quorum is present.
Thank you very much. Could I get a motion to approve the meeting minutes from April 11th, 2024?
So moved. Second.
Eager group.
Take your pick, Don. All right, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that motion carries. I'd be looking for a motion to approve the minutes from the April 25th, 2024.
Move for approval. Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Next, I'd be looking for a motion to approve the order of the agenda if there are no amendments, which I do not believe there are any.
Move approval. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries as well. Looking at the consent agenda, I'd be looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda with A, B, C, and C, I, and I2.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mayor Carlson.
Yes.
Mayor Mahoney.
Aye.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson.
Aye.
Mr. Ebbinger.
Aye.
Mr. Strand.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Mrs. Sherling.
Yes.
Mr. Grimberg.
Aye.
Mr. Selgerbold.
Aye.
And that is everyone.
Thank you, and that motion carries. So moving on to the regular agenda, I believe that Mr. Wilson will be providing the co-executive director update, and I will turn it over to you, Mr. Wilson.
Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you very much. The co-executive directors have been working with you as chair and legal counsel John Shockley over the past time to really identify the items that need our most immediate attention, sort of mid-range attention, and then longer-term needs of the authority as well. And one of the items that has come to our attention that really requires near-term follow-up and board direction involves diversion authority personnel policies. There are two sets of policies that really have been in play at various times over the past couple of years and have been authorized and or utilized simultaneously. And it appears that the Board of Authority has not fully and formally adopted the policy that is currently being utilized. The Diversion Authority has a memorandum of understanding with Cass County to provide the payroll and benefits to the Diversion Authority staff. At multiple points, the MOU does refer to the Cass County Human Resources Policy and the Cass County Employee Handbook. In accordance with this MOU, prior to 2022, the county provided HR services and support to the Diversion Authority really as needed and based on county policy. And I would tell you that this was not ongoing and detailed support. We issued payroll, we provided the health benefits, provided retirement, and then were available to answer specific questions that as they came up from the authority director. But it was not functioning as you would think of as normal HR day-to-day questions, answer directions. Separately, on December 15th of 2021, the authority entered into an agreement with High Roads Partners HR Solutions to deliver a custom employee handbook. High Road Partners delivered a Diversion Authority employee handbook to the former executive director in October of 2022. The Cass County Human Resources Director was provided a copy of that handbook to review, but was not asked to authorize or approve the material. A short time later, the former executive director informed Cass County that the Diversion Authority would adopt human resource policies described in the 2022 Diversion Authority Handbook that was prepared by High Roads Partners and no longer utilize county HR policies. After review of the Diversion Authority minutes, this change in policy was never considered or authorized by the Diversion Authority Board of Directors. In addition to the initial 2022 Diversion Authority Handbook, High Road Partners provided the former executive director with an update to the Diversion Authority Handbook in late 2023. Neither the Cass County Human Resources Director nor the Diversion Authority's General Counsel were provided a copy of the 2023 Diversion Authority Handbook, and the 2023 Diversion Authority Handbook was not approved by the Diversion Board of Authority. Now, at its May 7th, 2024 regular and properly noticed meeting, the Diversion Authority Planning Committee recommended referring this matter to HR Legal Counsel for further review and recommendation, and asked General Counsel to obtain a cost estimate to perform a legal review of this 2023 Diversion Authority Handbook from our HR Legal Counsel. And I would tell you that that estimate would be approximately $10,000 if you chose to authorize that. At the Authority Board meeting today, the board will be asked to consider the Planning Committee's recommendation and authorize that review. A lot of information there for you. I'd be happy to stand for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Questions from the board? Commissioner Peterson.
Madam Chair, thank you. So I'm going to address what's sort of been an elephant in the room on a number of matters on items like this. I think this board has always struggled with ownership of things, meaning, I'm just going to cut to the chase. Cass County, I'm biased. Cass County has an amazing HR policy. We've been utilizing it this entire time. The creation of another thing, because some of us are struggling with parochialism. I've always struggled with that. I don't care whether you use Fargos, Moorheads, Clays, or Casses. We've got all this stuff sitting in place right now and have for years. It's working, it's functioning, it's structured very well, frankly. From my perspective, this was a piece of redundancy because maybe a couple of us on this board or executive director didn't want to deal with a certain entity's particulars, for lack of a better word there. I would contend that this doesn't need to exist. It never needed to exist, and it's probably my fault for not being this vocal earlier. This is what my belief is right now. I think we continue to use Cass County's policy. We continue to ask Cass County's HR department as support for us because we need that. Eventually, this is going to be a machine, right? We're out of the politics part of it. We're out of the funding part of it. This is going to be a formalized structure, a formal business, if you will. And I can really get into the detail with that if you want me to as well. But where I stand right now is let's use Cass County's because Cass County's works. How do I know that? I've got almost 500 employees. Commissioner Shirley and Commissioner Grinberg have almost 500 employees working under this right now and have for years. And again, I'm not going to waver if we want to go to Fargo's or Clay's or Moorhead's either, but I'm comfortable with Cass's. It's been working so far. I propose we continue that way, and I'm sad we spent money on this, but we abandon this and continue status quo. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mayor Mahoney.
Would that be a formal motion? Because I think we think it's still Cass County policy, that's HR policy. We never voted on it, but I think the employees are on the impression in 22 it changed.
It never did. Sorry.
But, yeah, so do we want to reaffirm that we concur that it's the HR policy of the county?
Commissioner Peterson, would that be a motion?
Madam Chair, I'd be more than honored to make that motion. And I'm looking lovingly at my executive director and my county team, knowing full well what this means, because I'm proposing this into perpetuity. Because again, it works. And the structural changes that we'll do at Cass County over time, I would convey, obviously, anything, I guess I'm done in December, but whatever substantive changes transpires, we'd then bring to the authority and say, just as an advisory, here's what we're doing. Is there objections from this board? Again, treating it holistically. I'm team. So, Madam Chair, I would make that motion and then I'll shut up here.
Second.
Okay, so there is a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this item? Councilmember Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If you did make like big changes to the policy, would you let the board know beforehand And I'm addressing it to Commissioner Peterson.
Madam Chair, may I answer?
Correct, yes.
Commissioner Anderson, that's exactly what I propose. And again, I don't know what we do because we just re-engineered this entire policy because ours was somewhat dated as well. And as of a couple of years ago, when did we formally update this? Get my calendars right for me, my friend. It's about 2 years ago, right?
It was, when you say formally updated,
Cass County's policy.
Cass County's policy was adopted with the MOU that was adopted for HR services. If I could make one mention, if it were the direction of the board to formally adopt or affirm the Cass County policy, would want some ability for a transition or work with council to make sure that we have all of the appropriate steps in place, because it is our understanding that Diversion Authority employees have operated under the understanding that the policy in effect have been these updated policies produced by High Road Partners over the last couple of years. So we would want to just ensure that we can formally and methodically transition that, and that we don't get caught in some transition process.
Thank you for that, Mr. Wilson. I think that is vitally important when you have employees that had assumed they were working under one policy that has some significant differences than the policy that we assumed that they were working under. That would be important to work with them to transition. I don't know if that is something that you do, maybe a friendly, I guess I would be asking for a friendly amendment to add that to the motion.
Perfectly fine, Madam Chair.
Yes, fine.
Mayor Mahoney.
Just a question on this is that could you just kindly send us the Cass County policy so that the board understands what your policies are? Because
Absolutely.
vacation time, sick time, whatever, we're all a little different. And it'd just be nice to know that we just got the airport authority's policy, and it kind of helps you see what it is and what's reasonable. And also, I'm assuming by the last motion, Commissioner or Mayor Carlson, you're saying if there's discrepancies, Robert and Michael have the authority to fix them? Do they have to come back to the board to fix them, or can they just fix what has to be fixed?
I would look to Commissioner Peterson and Commissioner Ebinger on how you would like that worded as far as the amendment to your motion.
Yeah, Madam Chair, the way I interpreted your friendly amendment, and correct me if I am wrong, but the way I read it was essentially have legal counsel review ours to define if there's something catastrophic, meaning something missing or something that's gone awry out of lack of attentiveness, I guess. I don't know how to really explain that very well, but have legal counsel still review what we've already put into policy in place at the county and report back to us. And I would contend that, Mayor, to your point, I would empower our team, so our co-executive directors and our legal counsel, to look at that review. And I'd be hesitant to have them sort of approve carte blanche what they see. I'd want them to bring something back to us.
Well, it's just my concern. I think vacation days were different, so you may have accumulation of vacation days. You got to fix that, and employees run at one lot or whatever. And maybe to your point is just whatever's fixed, bring it back and show
Bingo.
it to us.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay.
So, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Edmund, or Mr.
Redlinger.
Redlinger, I'm thinking Ebinger, Redlinger.
Cousin.
Is a month a significant enough time period for you to kind of do that cross comparison and then bring the HR policy of Cass Counties to us, along with maybe a transition plan for the employees?
I believe so. I will consult with our HR director next week and work with Mr. Redlinger and city HR director, see if they see any challenges that would take longer than that. But my initial reaction is that we could easily provide something to you next month.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Redlinger and Mr. Wilson. Boy, I'm going to go 3 through 3, I'm sure, today. So, Commissioner Strand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just curious, in light of the reality that we're all dealing with a personnel issue right now, what's our roadmap? Which policies do we adhere to when we don't have an endorsed official policy? Are we on the high roads HR policies? or are we on the Cass counties currently?
So, Commissioner Strand, that's a good question. I would maybe look to our legal counsel for this, but my understanding is that the policy that was presented to the MFDA employees was never approved by this board, and that's where that discrepancy lies, is that they're technically legally operating under the Cass County HR policy because the other one was never approved by us.
And just for my own confirmation, that's our roadmap in the last couple months that we've been following for HR issues?
I'm going to defer this to our legal counsel. I'm not exactly sure how. My understanding was when it wasn't approved, it is the Cass County policy that we're operating under.
I
Thank
just
you.
hate to assume things.
Go ahead, Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Chairperson Carlson, Commissioner Strand, members of the Diversion Authority Board. My understanding is that the same as the co-executive director, Mr. Robert Wilson, is that the 2023 version of the MFDA handbook was not formally approved by this board. We could not locate any minutes showing approval, from my recollection, I don't ever recall any approvals either. Asking a number of people, there was never approved formally by this board. It presents an issue because for a matter of fairness to current employees, that's what they believe they were operating under. We haven't specifically researched what the requirements for transitioning from what was told to those employees to the Cass County HR manual, which is currently officially what was approved by the board. And so we wanted to wait until we had official action from the board before we took that step of what efforts would be required under law, and then also what efforts would be most equitable and favorable, not favorable, but most equitable and appropriate to transition current MFDA employees from what they thought they were operating under for HR policies to the Cass County HR policy. With the direction from the board, we can certainly review what that roadmap should look like along with the co-executive directors and provide some input, because my understanding is that major differences among many between the two HR manuals relate to the accumulation of vacation and sick time and carryover of vacation and sick time. And so those are things that are really important to a lot of employees. And so we want to measure twice and cut once, so to speak, before we come back with a recommendation of how that transition should occur. So hope I was able to answer that question.
Does that answer your question, Commissioner Strand?
It does, Madam Chair. I guess what I'll ask is this a Band-Aid to the circumstance we're in, or is this a proactive, futuristic decision that we regardless need to do and maybe should have done a long time ago?
Commissioner Peterson?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Strand, my motion is exactly that. It's to fix what never should have happened. This should have been the Cass County policy from day one and continued. And again, I'll blame myself for not being vocal enough when we went this next step. It should have just been, and not to say that I would have convinced you then either, but I could have been more vocal saying, we've got a structure in place. We've just reviewed this and created it brand new from Cass. Let's just do that, because again, once we move past policy, once we move past the fundraising, it's a structure now. So let's just pick a policy and go. And well, I love ours. So I hope that helps her.
Mayor Mahoney?
Mr. Strand, just to bring history back on this, when we originally went to DA authority and hired employees and a director, there was a conflict at times of which HR policy we were following. We elected to go with the counties because it made more sense at the time when we did this as a board, which we were all informed of, and we were going to do county policies. What began to happen on both watch on the chairs is sometimes the salaries coming in did not fit the match for the county. We had differences of what we were paying in grade and step and then what the DA was paying. We were under the impression the director went back and made a new grade and policy. We did not know other things changed in that policy. We assumed, and Chad and I'll go back and forth because we both did this, we assumed we were still following the same rules. But when we oftentimes had salaries which were more than many of our engineers and people were getting paid, they had to have a different grade and step that goes into that. So we were not aware of change in policy in vacation or sick time, which was part of that policy. And in fact, none of the board ever saw this new policy. So from our perspective and the board's perspective, we made a decision years ago, we'll follow county HR policy. And that's what we were under the impression we were.
Commissioner Campbell.
Yeah, thank you. You know, as was mentioned, we did talk about this in the planning committee meeting, and this is the exact concern that I raised at the time was we seem to have this conflict now with what probably most of the new diversion authority staff has been hired under, which could conflict with what Cass County's is in regards to vacation, and there could be some other things. It might even get into health insurance. I don't know what some of those things are, but the fact of the matter is they were recruited based on this policy that was never approved by this board. And so so I appreciate Commissioner Peterson's recommendation and willingness to have the county serve as in that capacity. But I think we still have to address this dilemma that I'm not so sure that Cass County is going to want to change all of their policies that have been in place because of the discrepancies and differences of the newly hired diversion staff. So that's the dilemma that needs to be worked out. Because I'm going to be dead set against having anything that goes contrary or takes away something from somebody who was hired based on what was the intent of benefits. I think we need to really be careful in that regard, and that becomes the conflicting issue with Cass County. You know, how if we're going to use Cass County's policy, how are we going to have this separate little deal for these employees?
Commissioner Peterson.
Commissioner, to that point, I think that it's time to rip the Band-Aid off. I'm not saying you're wrong, and that's what I'm hoping between legal counsel and our co-executive directors, they'll come back with that analysis for us to find out this is what they've been presumed to have had, this is what they have really had. Board members, what would you like to do? And then from this point going forward, the structure stands as Cass County's policy, period, full stop. But it's just, again, it's time to rip the Band-Aid off and figure out where we're at, and we can deal with as a board what we find.
Mayor Mahoney.
Well, I think what I think, Kevin, you're going to is we've got great employees. We have really good people that are doing great work, and we would like not to penalize them because of this oversight. So we're asking the county to come back with a solution that looks good for us. And we don't want to lose any employees. I just want all the DA employees to know you're great. You do great work. And sorry about the kerfuffle on the HR stuff, but we'll fix it. So
If that's what's in the motion and the friendly amendments, then I'm all for it.
Commissioner Strand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just curious if we're referring to our diversion authority staff, there must be some signed agreements that they entered into and we entered into when their employment commenced. Wouldn't those agreements reflect what they understand the realities to be and assumptions aside? I mean, these assumptions get me nervous. What do the agreements say?
Yeah, that is exactly what Mr. Wilson and Mr. Redlinger would be able to look at and look through during this month. Mr. Shockley.
Chairperson, the employees of the authority, other than the executive director, do not have employment agreements. They are hired just like any other employee of Cass County, which is an at-will employment. So they do not have employment agreements. There's no other employment agreement as between, say, the one of the directors and the authority. They're hired just like any other employee would be. The only employee that you had that had an employment agreement was the former executive director.
Thank you for clarifying that, Mr. Shockley. Commissioner.
Madam Chair, just to clarify here, we're going to vote on the motion, and it's my understanding then that the High Roads Partners is no longer, if this motion passes, it's no longer in play, other than the exceptions that'll come back after review from co-executive directors, perhaps Mr. Shockley, and we do not need Dorsey Whitney to have any further engagement on this.
Just, and thank you, Commissioner. What I would suggest for clarification is there are a number of items to unwind that, as I understand the motion, it's that the board is directing the co-executive directors to work with legal counsel to develop a plan to transition the current employees from what they believed was the HR manual to the Cass County HR manual. That would include a recommendation of when is an appropriate time to terminate the relationship with High Road Partners, because currently High Road Partners is still providing quote-unquote HR services for the Diversion Authority. And so that's one step. Another step is looking at what is the appropriate way to transition the differential accumulation of sick time and vacation time as between the Metro Flood Diversion Authority HR manual as they thought that it existed and the Cass County HR manual. And there may be some other differences regarding benefits that we have to develop a transition plan, then bring that transition plan back to the board next month so that you have that roadmap of how are we going to affect that. Is that
Question. Commissioner Sherling.
Thank you. So, Mr. Wilson, just clarify, the DA staff, do they get county health insurance and North Dakota's retirement plan through the county? Is that correct?
Indy PERS, yes, it is.
Okay.
That is correct.
Mayor Mahoney.
Just one final thing. You'll be working with the staff, Robert, I assume, talking to them about this particular issue and try to straighten it out.
Absolutely. Certainly understand the sensitivity of this and want to do it the right way and understand where that is a requirement.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, just final comment. I do intend to support the motion, and I hope that we can figure this out with the HR expertise of our political subdivisions and Mr. Shockley, and not have to engage more legal services for this simple exercise. It has to be pretty straightforward and black and white, in my opinion, to figure it out.
Commissioner Strand.
One last question, Madam Chair. With what we've been through since April with regards to the exit of our executive director, and we had planning committee members and leadership here, and you as chair involved, whose guidelines did we follow? We've referred to and acknowledged that we had HR guidance. Who was it? Who was it providing us this HR? Was it the county or was it the High Roads in the last couple months?
In reference to what?
The exit of our executive director and the handling of that.
That was the contract.
That was a contractual.
But who was giving us the HR guidance in that process?
Mr. Shockley.
Thank you. In this regard, our HR counsel has advised us not to make any public statements regarding this matter.
So, any further discussion related to the motion on the floor right now? Okay, there's motion and a second. So with this, why don't we get a roll call vote, please? And I also want to underscore my thoughts in relation to making sure that the employees that are with the Metro Flood Diversion Authority, that nothing during this transition would negatively affect them. I think that that's very important, and to have those conversations with them. So with that, roll call vote, please, Don.
Mayor Carlson.
Yes.
Mayor Mahoney.
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson.
Yes.
Mr. Ebinger.
Yes.
Mr. Strand.
No.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Mrs. Sherling.
Yes.
Mr. Grimberg.
Aye.
Mr. Salzwald.
Aye.
And that is everyone.
All right, that motion carries. Moving on to 4B, this would be the Executive Director next steps, and I'm turning this over to Mr. Redlinger, who I now know exactly how to say your name and everything.
Well, thank you, Chair Carlson, and members of the Board of Authority. Good evening. I will provide a brief update regarding the next steps with your recruitment and selection process for the Executive Director position. The Planning Committee of the Board of Authority discussed this matter on May 7 of 2024. And on May 7, we had talked about some of the background of what had been done previously with the search processes. I included a link to all of that information within your packet. I won't get into great detail on that today, but just know that back in 2017, 18, and 19, we had quite a bit of discussion about the position description, about what it should include, what it should not include, and then how we should procure that position and what we should do for consultant services. We eventually ended up using a consultant at that time. That will be a question for this board to determine, and I'll talk about that at the very end. So in addition to the link of background materials, I also had included for your discussion today, the existing job description. That is the description that Cass County HR was kind enough to put together back in 2017. And it's from that job description that we work to try find edits and revisions that would be appropriate for the time being and moving forward in 2024 and 2025. So really the goal today is to walk through that existing position description and receive any requested changes, edits that you may have as a board. And I would just reiterate, this is really your selection. This is your process. This is really to your direction as to what you would like to do with the job description. Your co-executive directors are certainly here to assist you, but that is our role, and our role only is to assist the board in its next steps with this position. This is your process. So to start, if we could, and this is up on the screen as well, if we could look at in the PDF packet, this is page 96. If we could look at the job description at present, I did send out this information last week and sent a refresher on Tuesday night, just asking for any feedback and comments. I would say generally on the job duties as well as the qualifications and experience, I didn't receive many comments, but one that was very clear and unequivocal was that we should think about a broader, deeper perspective beyond just a technical or engineering perspective. Perhaps it's an individual that would have a deeper experience with government, with legal, with financial matters and affairs, and have the experience commensurate to that as we think about our project management here for the Fargo-Moorhead diversion. So the comment was very specific, the one that I did receive, that we need to think bigger. We should be thinking about large government projects as well as someone who's had some pretty good experience. I would also add that the one individual that contacted me made note that we don't necessarily need to look to an engineering degree or the program management or project management certificate or endorsement, PMP. That is something that if you are in the space of, like Paul Barthel and others, many people have PMPs, and that's great, but perhaps that's not an attribute that would be necessary for our job. Rather, that complex government experience and management would be more appropriate for our position. I would also just share under general skills and abilities, one feedback point that I have received is that we really need somebody with strong communication skills, abilities to manage really complex streams of work, as well as have that critical acumen to think about managing the consultants, managing the affairs and business of the board. And just to be able to do that with political astuteness is something that would be really highly desired. I also received just some limited feedback from your PMC team, and just appreciate their comments as well as they looked at your existing job description. I think these can be included very simply and succinctly, and that is that our future directors should have some acumen as it relates to P3 compliance and enforcement, as well as management of finances and budget, as we discussed earlier, as well as the development and implementation of policies and procedures when we talk about post-operation monitoring, cleanup activities, as well as asset management. We will have a variety of assets that we will own that we will need to think about improving and maintaining over time, and that the future director should really have some experience in that regard, as well as experience with permitting, easements, and right-of-way management as well. So in terms of a timeline, if the Board of Authority did decide to give a green light to recruiting and advertising the position, what we would do is get this posted up yet this month and in early June, really be advertising for a period of 30 to 45 days, ideally closing the position right after the 4th of July holiday, and then would be coming back to the board and talking about how you would like to screen candidates, providing a report about how many candidates were interested in the position. As I look and work backwards from a hiring timeline, I believe that in just looking at our timeline, if we were to advertise for that period, we could look at having somebody here, hopefully right after Labor Day. And depending on how the board would want to configure its selection process, if you'd want to use a selection committee, or if the full board would want to engage in this endeavor. So again, I'll just leave it at that. We're happy to assist with anything that we can do to help you. The Cass County HR Department in the past, as they will be looked to in the future, as it relates to this search, has been really immensely helpful. And I will work with Robert and his team to make sure that we're getting the word out. I would just in close say that we had advertising locations of about 15 to 20 different locations in 2017, 2018 that we looked at. We would likely reengage all of those same posting locations, both technical as well as government, like the National League of Cities, the Association of Counties, et cetera. And so we would get that word out. So defer to the board, certainly on your next steps. We're happy to take your direction and feedback on next steps. So we'll leave it at that for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Redlinger. Questions or comments from the board members? Okay, well, how would
Madam
you
Chair.
guys like to proceed?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Ebinger.
Yeah, Michael, just one question. At this point, we're not even considering whether we're going to use an outside agency.
That is correct, Madam Chair, members of the board, and Commissioner Ebinger. That is correct. The Planning Committee was very clear in its discussion on May 7th that this should be an in-house activity, that we not engage consultant services. I would also add to that if you were to engage consultant services, you would likely need to add more time to your calendar because you would need to procure that consultant, go through an RFP process, and then get somebody on board. That would add time. Likely, you would probably add at least 2 months of process to be able to get a permanent executive director.
I see that as good news. Have not seen, and in fact, we've been mutual on this, have not seen great results with a lot of the consultants that are out there. So if we can try and keep this in-house, that's good.
Commissioner Campbell.
Yeah, I just want to revisit going way back when we originally started this conversation and how we would go about an executive director position and the vast amount of work and experience that would need to be required from that position, and what those job duties were, and the political discussions moving forward, and all of, and the, you know, and I brought up back then that executive director position, in my opinion, would look different during the build-out phase than what it would when the build-out phase was complete. And of course, you start talking about, you know, and it's an attractive salary that we have right now for that executive director position. But at some point in time, I've always felt that it's going to become more of a managerial role than it is an executive director on a build out of a project of this magnitude. And I, you know, so I'm curious of where the board wants to go with hiring an executive director with a job description right now. If we're using the same job description as when we originally hired this position, what's going to happen when a lot of those responsibilities and a lot of those things are no longer part of the job? Are we still going to be paying the salary that we have for somebody who, I agree that the asset management and all those things are important. They're all going to need to be done. But at some point in time, I don't know that we're going to need to have the same position. And I said it at the very start of this project. And if we're going to be hiring somebody, is our intent for them to just continue on, you know, for the next 20 years with that position, paying the same pay that we are today, when the responsibilities can be completely different? I said that then, and I still believe it today, that they're two different jobs.
Commissioner Shirley.
Thank you. That is why, that is the only reason I would support a contract. Otherwise, we're in North Dakota and they're at-will employees. So without a contract, you are hiring somebody indefinitely, in my mind anyway. But I think if we have a contract for however long, I mean, obviously, it's kind of tough to expect somebody to take a pay cut after a number of years. I mean, it would need to be a 5-year contract, whatever. I'm just throwing that out there. That's how I see it, but.
That's exactly what I'm getting at, is that the position that we're looking to fulfill right now, has that got an end date? Because of the duties and responsibilities will ultimately change. And we need to be fair to all who would apply, knowing that, unless we're willing to right now say that we're going to just continue on and pay $250,000, whatever that number is, indefinitely, moving forward, we have to have this discussion.
Mayor Mahoney.
Kevin, I would agree the job has changed. I think the job when we first advertised it, we wanted an engineer and we got somebody that had to do politics and get money and do a variety of different political actions now. All that's in place right now. I would like, Chad talked about his HR department. I would like them actually to revise the position and have a position that is tailored to the fact that they may stay on and manage the project after it's completed, because I think our thoughts were their CEO that we had who would go on to another P3 project somewhere, and then we'd hire somebody for maintenance. I think that's where we were sitting at, but we're mid-growth right now in it. And I know, Michael, I don't know what your salary range is, but I was under the impression that the Planning Commission came up with a lower salary. We had transposed a salary around $200,000 is where that job started, and it migrated to $240,000. But I think that we had talked about early on that we actually were thinking of a lower salary. So, Michael, if we're advertising right now, what is the salary range?
So if we were to advertise right now, thank you, Mayor and members of the board, for that question. It would be an open question because that is not established. We could certainly do that. To your point, we could look at some additional comp analysis using both the county system as well as the city of Fargo system, just to kind of get some ideas for that. That was a negotiated item that on that contract, on that employment agreement, that resulted in the number that it was. But we could absolutely look to that on just a brief comp review. And if we could also look at, for example, removing even I believe the description says that it is a PMP or a PE preferred, you could remove that. That might also change some of the comp analysis, and we could just keep it focused more on that master's preferred or a bachelor's plus 10 to 15 years. I believe it's 15 years experience. So we could see what that number looks like and then put that to paper.
Okay. Commissioner Peterson and then Commissioner Grinberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Campbell, I think to your point, with an HR policy, here's how this would evolve. It would be a restructure and a reanalysis of the job description at that period when we say we no longer need that executive director in this stead. We're all done. Everything's operational. We simply need someone to evolve into that new position. We'd go to what's called our Employee Overview Committee. Employee Overview Committee makes a recommendation, and that creates the new job description and the new pay structure. So I think to your point, I'm agreeing with you. I don't think we need this person at this level of expertise in various areas into perpetuity. So I think that there's going to be a time, and again, we've got that policy in place and how we do that in CAS. When a position evolves, you evolve it at that time, you come back. And I do like the idea, though, whoever's applying for this would be open about it. Because I frankly think whoever we hire, maybe speaking too much here, but I think whoever we hire is going to go on to whatever's next.
If I can just respond, and again, and that's exactly what I'm concerned about, is that whoever we're going to offer the job to or contract to, that understanding that, and I'm going to use the words that we use in Clay County HR, a PDQ, which is basically your establishment of criteria, job criteria. When that changes, so does the position. And I don't want us to hire somebody without them knowing that this position could change.
Commissioner Grinberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I tend to support, the direction and the comments from Commissioner Campbell. the discussion at the planning committee, to add to Mayor Mahoney's point, was the thoughts of the planning commission members, but to bring this forward for this discussion at the full board and not being presumptive at the planning committee. You know, the media followed up with me in a comment I had made about not using a consultant. And I also shared that, in my opinion, to the discussion here, is the skill set required 2 years from now is not what we needed when we originally hired the executive director. And so I think it's incumbent on us to provide the feedback, look at this position description, and if it takes a couple more weeks to get consensus on what that position is, then go forward and post, and then determine what a salary range for that new set of skills is. We don't want to get too far out over our skis at this point until we have consensus on what this position looks like. If it adds a couple more weeks into September, or October, so be it. And I also said when I was interviewed by the media, at some point we're going to start reining back our consultant services. It's on a 2-year horizon, in my opinion. And so with the priority of the skill set we have in consultants, that's going to change. And a new person coming in isn't going to have the knowledge base, particularly of some of the legal matters we're dealing with. So we're going to still rely on who we appointed as a board to handle those issues. And so I think over time, over the next month, we could get there. That's how I see this from a logistical standpoint.
Commissioner Strand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess my guidance would be we go to outside experts. You know, we're a bunch of politicians. We represent our jurisdiction sitting at a board of directors for a $3.2 billion project. You know, I would expect that, you know, when we got the project cleared through and avoided the litigation, one of my thoughts was this is the time to step up and have a board of directors that reflects the skill sets you need for a project that big. But I understand we're jurisdictions and we have representatives at the table. And also, however, Commissioner Peterson, you know, I don't want us to be parochial. With a project this big and this immense, we need the best candidates we can find out there to deliver us the result we're looking for in a costly, timely fashion. We don't want any delays. We don't want any cost increases. You know, and I don't care if it delays us a couple months. In my opinion, and I'm just one of a board, I would say we go to outside services to bring in consultants that have expertise at this level, not the local not the local politicians who represent their parochial jurisdictions, but the project. You know, that's my head. You know, I can't comprehend the immensity of this type of a project, and I just represent. I'm just appointed by the city to sit on this board. Don't know that that's the skill set we'd want necessarily if we were constructing a board to deliver a project of this magnitude. We'd have people with skill sets that bring to the table what you want there. So I feel the same about an executive director. If we were to bring this all in-house and have it all done inside, I'll tell you what we'll get. We'll get somebody all of us know. Maybe the best candidate in the world for a $3.2 billion project is here in our community. I'm not sure that's the case.
Okay, so what would the board like to do as far as proceeding? Do you want to direct our co-executive directors to utilize the HR experts within Cass County and Fargo? You can probably consult with the other HR experts in our other jurisdictions as well to maybe restructure and reanalyze the position job description, or did you want to look to an outside consulting firm? Commissioner Ebinger.
Okay, I've only been a politician for 3 years, and I was in government for 40. I was hired after having been through 5 different procedures to interview and select police chiefs, some in some very large communities. We have got HR consultants or HR personnel here at our disposal from all of our jurisdictions. We just did this with Triple RDC and had phenomenal success with it. And how many sources were we going to advertise in?
We did about 15 to 20, might have been 25 different placement locations last time. We could certainly revisit that list.
Most of them are going to be national.
Correct. Regional and national.
I would bet my next pension check that it's not going to be a local boy. And if it is, so be it. But we're going to have a diverse and a widespread opportunity to advertise this job. It's an international coalition that we're working with. I think we're going to attract some very good candidates in here, and I think we have the talent to do this. Unfortunately, I've had a couple of really bad experiences working with consultants that come in. A lot of times they have the person they want you to hire, and it's because it's somebody they're basically trying to sell to you. We have talent within our agencies to follow good protocols for HR recruitment and interviewing. We just had a great successful job here with the dispatch center. I do not see needing to get a consultant.
Mayor Mahoney.
Are you looking for an action item?
Yes, this is
I would
an
move-
action item.
I would move that Mike and Robert work with the HR departments of the county and the city, write up a job description, and have the planning committee review. If that is reasonable, then that can come back to the board as a final job that we're going to define.
Okay, would there be a second?
I'll second that, and then I'll also add, encourage board members to bring their ideas forward to the co-executive directors in this process.
And I agree with that, Tony, because we haven't sent anything to him. Mike's looking at it and said, who's sending stuff in here? And there's no application. There were no suggestions made. So would ask any board member to be participant in that and what they want to see changed in that position.
Okay. Any further discussion on this action item?
Just a
Commissioner
clarification
Strand.
with Mayor Mahoney, your motion is to have the HR folks create this job description and come back to us. It doesn't go beyond that as far as the next stages?
We'd go to planning commission or committee, and it would come back to the board, the final job description.
And that's the job description, not the hiring process.
That is my understanding. It would just be to restructure and reanalyze the job description, and then the planning committee would review it, maybe make some different suggestions, and then bring it to the full board. The job description would need to be approved by this full board. Commissioner Campbell.
Thank you, Mayor Carlson. I'm going to support the motion. I think it's good, but maybe if we could also then have some sort of their input on what the remaining build-out time period is and what that job description is going to need and entitle, and what might it be after that. I think we need to have both of those items in front of us so that, so when we go to advertise for the position, we're going to know what we need in a short term, medium term, and long term, because they might be different things. And I'd be concerned about not having that.
Any further discussion?
I would accept that as a friendly amendment.
Thank you.
All right. Seeing none, with that, could we get a roll call, please, Don?
Mayor Carlson.
Yes.
Mayor Mahoney.
Aye.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson.
Yes.
Mr. Emminger.
Yes.
Mr. Strand.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Mrs. Shirley.
Yes.
Mr. Grimberg.
Aye.
Mr. Salzerwald.
Aye.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don, and that motion carries. But also just as a side note that it was referenced that it might be a local boy. It also could be a local woman. We might apply.
I stand corrected.
Right. Moving on to our general council update, I will turn this over to Mr. John Shockley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Diversion Authority Board. The first item I have for you is a housekeeping matter. We have a change in membership in the Land Management Committee. The change is listed on Exhibit A as just changing out the City of Fargo member. Happy to answer any questions, but it's a housekeeping matter.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. This would be a action item as well. Any questions?
Move to approve.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, this is a roll call vote. So roll call vote, please.
Mayor Carlson.
Yes.
Mayor Mahoney.
Aye.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson.
Yes.
Mr. Emminger.
Yes.
Mr. Strand.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Mrs. Shirley.
Yes.
Mr. Grimberg.
Aye.
Mr. Salzerwald.
Aye.
And that is everyone.
Thank you, and that motion carries. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, 5B, is a resolution related to the automatic issuance and exchange of temporary authority improvement warrants, and I'll turn this over to our Attorney John Shockley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Diversion Authority Board. Just briefly, from a historical standpoint, you'll recall in 2021, the authority issued, along with Cass County Joint Water Resource District, the $569 million US EPA WIFIA loan. As part of the terms and conditions of that loan agreement and the indenture that accompanied it, the US EPA wanted to be treated as a senior, essentially a senior lender. So they wanted both a lien on the sales and use tax revenue, along with a portion of the assessment district essentially carved out to them as sort of a double barrel security. Doesn't mean that we'll be assessing, they just wanted to make sure that there was sufficient capacity in the event that there was insufficient sales tax. And so as part of that, we carved approximately $90 million out of the total $870 million assessment district, and that was negotiated with US EPA WIFIA. Because we're in construction, we issued temporary improvement warrants. Under North Dakota law, the temporary improvement warrants have a maximum maturity of 3 years. And so the 3 years, it's hard to believe, is up, and we need to renew the temporary improvement warrants. This morning, the Cass County Joint Water Resource District, I attended their meeting. They did authorize the renewal of these, and that is subject to final approval by the Diversion Authority Board. The $90 million is based in part upon a analysis by WIFIA, and then along with the SRF loan, which is treated on what we refer to in the finance world as on parity with the US EPA WIFIA loan. Happy to answer any questions. Tried not to keep it tried to keep it pretty high level, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Any questions for Mr. Shockley? If not, this is an action item.
Move for approval.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any other discussion? Roll call vote, please, Don.
Mayor Carlson.
Yes.
Mayor Mahoney.
Aye.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson.
Aye.
Mr. Ebinger.
Aye.
Mr. Strand.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Mrs. Sherling.
Yes.
Mr. Grimberg.
Aye.
Mr. Selgervold.
Aye.
And this includes everyone.
Thank you, and that motion carries. Moving on to number 6, construction project updates. And Ms. Terry Williams is not available today, so MFDA Attorney Chris Brockegard is going to provide this project update.
Thanks, Chair Carlson, members of the board. Yeah, Terry sends her regrets she's not able to join us by phone today, so I'm going to do a quick core update and then also update on the construction status for the diversion project as well. Probably just a couple things to highlight here. You'll see in the drone video the Red River structure still continuing full force construction. Also, if you scroll down a little bit, probably more under the item number 8, the Corps is implementing and starting their contracts on several of the bid items that they had bid openings they had earlier this year. They did award the project on SE4 recently. The bids came in just a little bit under 24 million to a contractor out of Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. Again, that was a fair amount less than the government estimate, but again, another good bid. So they'll be standing up that contract and starting construction there as well. Again, just also note in item 9, we're down to our last 2 segments of design for the Corps, which we are starting our final review stretch here over the summer, and they'll be looking to bid those this fall for award early next year as well. So with that, I'd stand for any questions you might have related to the Corps program.
Thank you, Mr. Brockegard. Any questions from the board? Commissioner Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I've always asked the same question every time. You probably can anticipate the exact question I'm going to ask. So when a bid is that different from the actual estimate, is there any concern with the bidders?
Madam Chair and Commissioner Peterson, I haven't talked with Terry or their team about this particular bid, and I haven't analyzed this particular bid opening. But typically, there's an evaluation done to make sure that there isn't anything that is out of place with the bid, missing numbers or things like that as they're doing their estimate review. And beyond that, then they would look at whether there was a competent contractor, and if it was, they would award being the lowest responsible bidder. So,
Okay, thank you.
Chris, we'd really like to have them bid on some of the projects in Fargo, so if you could get them to do that, I'd love that.
don't disagree, Mayor.
Any further questions for Mr. Brackyard? All right, this was just for our information only. So moving on to the next item, this is also Mr. Brackyard.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Carlson, members of the board. Real quick update on the diversion channel. Things have been slowed just slightly with the rainy weather the last couple of weeks, but they still are making good progress. I think just a couple things to highlight. The drone video that you'll see in a minute will highlight a lot of things related to construction. Just a couple of note that aren't on the bullets. They are looking to set beams on 2 more bridges in the next few weeks, so we should have that update for you in June. That would be on 38th Street and County Road 10. So they're making progress on the bridges. Still anticipating we'll have probably a deck pour here in the next month or 2 on our first bridge. So again, nice progress on the bridge side. Also on the BNSF Hillsboro, they are very nearing completion of the temporary bypass there and anticipate having trains on that within the next week or 2. So expect that we'll have another railroad bridge under construction as well. With that, I think the rest of the items are pretty straightforward on the bullets, and I can certainly answer any questions you might have related to other construction items on the channel program.
Thank you, Mr. Brackyard. Any questions?
That's not close to us.
Seeing none, you can move on to the next item on the agenda.
Yeah, Madam Chair, before I should have noted, before I step into the safety update, I did want to correct a number that I shared last month. Commissioner Pepcorn asked me kind of an overall progress of construction. And we have been tracking that. I, however, grabbed the number out of my head from just one portion of the project. So I think I had told you last month we were about 25% done with the overall, the 3 programs, the in-town program, the Corps of Engineers program, and the Diversion Channel program. We're closer to 40% done. We were between 25 and 30% done on the channel. I just grabbed the wrong number out of my head. So my apologies for not pulling the right number out of the data bank, but just wanted to correct that we're between 40 and 45% done with the overall project at this point.
Thank you.
And then for safety, we did have a few more recordable events this last month. Nothing of significance or to note. Probably the only other thing I wanted to, apologies, there weren't any recordable events this last month, sorry. I looked at the wrong chart there. So we had a good month related to that, a couple of minor vehicle incidences and near misses. Probably the other note that I wanted to make is we did cross over 1 million hours worked on the diversion channel this past month. So I think that's a nice accomplishment for the number of hours and work that our contracting teams have been putting in on the project as well. So with that, I can stand for any questions related to the safety update.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, you can move on to the last item.
Sounds good. Now we'll start the drone video.
Hi, I'm Tom Fuchs, Senior Construction Manager with the Metro Flood Diversion Authority, with your May construction update. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers awarded contracts this spring for 2 segments of the southern embankment, the earthen levee that will contain the upstream mitigation area. As they prepare to award a contract for the 3rd stretch, work began on the stretch known as SE-1B, which lies immediately west of the diversion inlet structure. The Corps contractor HSG Park Joint Venture 2 began work by stripping topsoil and importing borrow material, which they will use to construct realignments for County Roads 16 and 17. The final design will incorporate a 3-legged roundabout where the county roads intersect, with the east leg of County Road 16 passing up and over the southern embankment. Nearby at the Red River structure, the largest of the 3 control structures on the FM area diversion project, the Corps contractor has been busy working on the west side. With concrete work substantially complete at the west abutment and pier, crews are now stressing the first of the structure's post-tension bars, which will strengthen critical elements of the concrete structure. In the structure's west bay, crews installed the Tanner Gate embed plates, where the gates will seal and slide against the structure on both sides. They also began assembling the first of the structure's 3 gates. Additionally, Ames Construction, the core contractor, is doing concrete work on the east pier and abutment. While HSG Park works on the southern embankment, ASN Constructors is excavating nearby on Reach 13 of the stormwater diversion channel. They have now surpassed 20 million cubic yards of material moved. That's enough to fill every space and crevice within the Fargo Dome more than 9 times. Also in Reach 13, just northwest of the diversion inlet structure, ASN Constructors began work at the Cheyenne River Aqueduct, the second of 2 they're building. You'll notice we shifted from our drone view here as we see them begin to drive sheet piles and H-piles. Due to an active eagle nest near the site, we will be watching this work progress from a different angle. Work also continues at numerous other sites for ASN Constructors. As we look east from the 32nd Avenue West Channel crossing, where pile driving is now underway, we can see its proximity to West Fargo. The channel in this area will run just west of the city's boundaries. As we move north of the Maple River to the BNSF railway line, we can see that the concrete substructure for the BNSF Prosper Bridge is taking shape. Our final stop on this month's tour of construction highlights is at the Rush River Inlet. ASN Constructors recently began stripping and excavating the site. Similar to the diversion outlet on the far north end of the stormwater diversion channel, the Rush River Inlet will be an open channel excavation with armored rock arch rapids and 23 boulder weirs to guard against erosion. As you can see, it's already shaping up to be a busy construction schedule for the FM area diversion this season. Stay current on the progress by following us on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, or X.
Thank you for that. All right, moving on to number 7, communications team update, and I will turn this over to Miss Amy Beasley-Wilson.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the board. The May newsletter again performed well, and I hope you had a chance to see Alex Offerdahl's Faces of the Diversion video. He did a really nice job for us, and next month we'll be featuring Captain Kyle Volk with the Corps. We had a chance to interview him this week. We also pushed out a few construction update videos, one on the Red River structure, another on I-29, and you'll actually see one this evening on our social channels about the aqueducts and the work being done there. For media relations, we sent the April construction update release and got some media coverage from that. We're also continuing to educate on the DRB process and pushed out a blog on the crop insurance programs to begin to educate more on what's being done there. In terms of our partners, they sent out a release on the OHB open house that the Corps hosted, and then ASN Constructors shared news about their safety week, and they donated food to the Downtown Engagement Center afterwards. So we had a fair amount of media relations this month. That's all I have to report, but I'm always happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Amy? None. Thank you so much. Moving on to land management update. We'll turn this over to Miss Jody Smith.
I know you got my name right, so.
Mm-hmm.
So the usual suspects are up on the screen before you. On the left-hand side, you can see an overall project overview. I know we discussed this slightly at the Finance Committee, but along the channel, there's one small parcel just south of I-94. Settlement has been reached. We're just waiting for our legal counsel to be able to work through that purchase agreement. Hopeful that that will be able to close in the upcoming months. On the right-hand side, you can see an inflated map of the upstream mitigation area. Again, everything that is shaded green, we have acquired the necessary property rights. In blue, we are still in negotiation, and in orange, we are in eminent domain. Note down in the Christine level, you're going to see some of them are the gold color. Those we are currently working through right of entries. We did file court order right of entries for those who weren't able to acquire it voluntarily. So we'll continue to go through that process with them, and you'll continue to get some updates. On the next slide, then, we'll go through just quickly the updates. The construction footprint holds steady at 95.4%, and in the UMA footprint, we're sitting just over 49%, which is up 1% from last month. The next slide is an overall project overview. Again, Southern Embankment, there were no changes from the previous month. I do know that we have settled on the majority of them. We do have one eminent domain case that will be filed on Southern Embankment Reach 1. A purchase agreement had already been signed with an option agreement if there were any changes to the final design. That final design did come through. The property owner was not amenable to those to the purchase agreement, which was signed many years ago. We were not able to negotiate a settlement, so that will be filed in the upcoming weeks, and it'll be our only eminent domain case along Southern Embankment. Upstream mitigation area, again, we're sitting just over 49%. In the environmental monitoring easements, we don't have any change since last month. On the next slide, then, we'll go through the construction footprint, the UMA footprint. You can see the owner groups versus what we need for construction and the footprint and the various parcel groups. And then on the final slide, we just have an overview of our key activities over the past month. We do like to emphasize that even though we do file eminent domain, we do that so we can maintain our schedule. We are continuing to negotiate those settlement agreements. We did successfully mediate with 5 owners on 6 parcels. We do have mediation scheduled for June and July. We are trying to bring on an additional mediator to help us mediate additional cases and accommodate that schedule. I do want to thank Larkin, Hoffman, and Onstead Twitchell. When we do these mediations, you're essentially preparing for trial when you walk in the room. So they're very lengthy. Don does a great job of supporting me in the office, and so does Diane with Jacobs. I do require a lot of assistance when I'm locked in a room for 12 hours and just helping me continue to navigate all of that. So in the last month, we did close an additional 3 parcels. We have quite a few in the queue that our legal counsel is working through those purchase agreements to continue to see the progress that's being made. There was an informational meeting held with Wolverton with the Buffalo Red Water Resource District. That was approximately 2 weeks ago. And then as previously noted, there was a pre-construction meeting in the Oxbow, Hickson-Baki area for that project down there that was very well attended. So our stakeholders, the Corps was down there with us and answering any questions that the property owners might have. We have developed a tracking system for the release of temporary construction easements, so that's a significant sign. That means some of our construction is coming to a completion. So we will be going through that review process on both SE1. We will go through that process on the I-29 roadways, and then I know that our RVA is going to continue to look at that starting at the Northern Reach. They will be providing us documentation that will allow us to provide the landowners the release of those TCEs prior to the expiration of the TCE. So whenever we're able to hand the property back over to the property owner sooner than was anticipated, we do plan on doing that. And then we did finish our farmland leases today. So thank you to both the Cass County Joint and the Moorhead-Clay County Joint Authority. So open to any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Any questions
I have one.
or comments? Commissioner Shirley?
Thank you. Just curious, a continuation of the farmland leases. I know that we've approved several excess lands disposals recently. What's the timeline for disposing of all of that lands and no longer having leases? Or is there one?
There is, so Chairman and Commissioner Shirling and members of the board, there is actually a strategy in my head, I should say, about this. So I try to not release land that is being surrounded by construction just in case there's an issue and we may need land that one of the respective boards owns, whether that be for a permanent stockpile, additional TC, or there's just an issue out there. Once we complete construction in that area, then I do plan on evaluating that and going through the excess lands policy. As you are aware, we have 3 portions of our rail corridor going through Horace up for sale. Of the 5, I do plan on calling a lands committee meeting in July. So hopefully we can get another section of that up for sale. And then the majority of the ones that we've been putting up for sale are the rural residential lots. So they tend to be under 10 acres. There was a home on there. We've mitigated that home, and then we're going to go ahead and put that up for sale. I also look at the surrounding land. So if there's surrounding land that is still in negotiation or in eminent domain, then what I will do is hold on to that land because it may become a tool for settlement negotiations. So I have one that we're working through right now that's a it's a fairly significant settlement. They are interested in some of our excess land, whether that be for farmland or that be for development. So we'll incorporate their requests for some of the excess land into that settlement negotiation. So I try to release the ones that are sitting on the JT Lawn Services. I know Commissioner Peterson had asked about the kind of the cost of that. So those that are requiring the weeding and mowing, because they don't bring value as far as being able to do the farmland lease, we are trying to release those because at this point they are an expense and liability to the project versus being able to recoup income off of them. So did I answer your question?
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Any further questions? All right, seeing none, thank you so much, Ms. Smith. Moving on to the finance update, Mayor Dartis is not with us here today, so this report will be given by Mr. Robert Wilson.
Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you. The Finance Committee met yesterday. Presentation of bills that were approved for the last month totaled $4,714,017.94. The net position of the authority at this time is $243,698,752. The board approved 2 contracting actions. One was Task Order 16, Amendment 0 for utility relocation with Cass County Electric Co-op in the amount of $556,000. That is to bury 2.2 miles of overhead feeder lines that are coming out of the Oxbow substation. Work Package 47C, Change Order Number 2 for test holes and wells with LPT Enterprises in the amount of $142,993 was also approved. The description of that was that this is related to aquifer testing. Description was that when they did test wells at the beginning of that project, wells of a particular depth were anticipated when they got into the actual project, had to end up digging a little bit deeper wells, and that required a little extra effort, a little extra material to go down a little further. So that was the reason for that increased cost. There was one bid award that was for Work Package 52A, gravel resurfacing in the Stanley Township area. 3 bids were received. The low bid was provided by Industrial Builders in the amount of $479,655. That was 4% higher than the engineer's estimate of $459,002.50. That 4% overage was within the budgeted contingency, and that was approved. And there was also a relocation of the lands budget approved that does not impact the overall lands budget. It was just a reallocation across several line items. And that would conclude my report. I would stand by for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Any questions? All right, seeing none, thank you very much. The next is under other business. This would be the WP52A bid award, and I will turn this over to Mr. Chris Bachegard.
Thanks, Chair Carlson, members of the board. As Robert just said, we did receive one bid opening this last month. I think he did a good job of summarizing the bid. So unless there's questions, the Finance Committee did recommend award of this project to the full board. So we'd be looking for an approval.
Move to approve.
They're very excited to approve this bid.
I guess.
I'll third.
So we have a motion and a
Madam Chair,
second.
can I third?
So any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mayor Carlson?
Yes.
Mayor Mahoney?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson?
Yes.
Mr. Ebinger?
Yes.
Mr. Strand?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mrs. Sterling?
Yes.
Mr. Grimberg?
Aye.
Mr. Salzvold?
Aye.
And that includes everyone.
Thank you, and that motion carries. The next item on the agenda would be to go into closed executive session. So I'd be looking for a motion to go into closed executive session pursuant to North Dakota Century Code, Section 44-04-19.1, Subdivision 2 and 5, and North Dakota Century Code, Section 44-04-19.2, in anticipation of reasonably predictable and pending civil or adversarial administrative proceedings regarding the submittal of the ECR issue to the Technical Dispute Resolution Board, and to receive external P3 litigation counsel's advice and guidance in anticipation of reasonably anticipated adversarial administrative proceedings and disputes regarding the interrelated matters of the status and potential application of noncompliance points pursuant to the project agreement. I believe that we could do two motions to go into both closed executive sessions, so I'm going to read the second.
Madam Chair, I request a division of the question and deal with them separately, please.
Okay. Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to specify that we noted in the agenda that there's no anticipated decision after the first executive session. So the intent is that we'll complete the first executive session and then go into the second executive session. There are different people that would be attending the second executive session, and so we would excuse from the first one some of the people from that first executive session so we can go into the second one. But you can certainly take both that, do both separate.
I'll move the first.
And I'll second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to go into closed executive session on number 11 on the agenda. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we will be going into executive session momentarily.
Chair, I'd move the second executive session language. And if you want me to read that, I sure can.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
This is my stated motion, Madam Chair and members of the Diversion Authority Board. Close the executive session pursuant to North Dakota Century Code 4404-19.1, Subdivision 2, 5, and 9 of the North Dakota Century Code 44-04-9.2 regarding an update from the chair and the external P3 litigation and HR counsel's advice and guidance regarding negotiating instructions and updates for a potential agreement with the former executive director.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Commissioner Strand?
Madam Chair, for the sake of the record, I'd like to enter my concerns about whether or not these are legally viable reasons by North Dakota statute to go into executive session. And if we do go into executive session, I admonish us to follow the letter of the law specifically. And I'll just remind us, we're a North Dakota entity. Almost half of us are Minnesotans or not in North Dakota, so it's important we follow the North Dakota statutes guiding us. And I'm going to read something and I have multiple Attorney General opinions, and just for the sake of sharing for our own guidance, we can go into executive sessions if, an executive session held for a negotiation is authorized only if the discussions are in the context of providing negotiation instructions or discussing negotiation strategy, and only if allowing the other party to the negotiation to listen to the discussion would result in increased costs to the public entity. I'm not sure if that's the case or not, but I'm raising that as one point. Secondly, in our own motion, we're calling twice in our motion for updates. North Dakota law specifically says the Century Code does not authorize an executive session for a governing body to receive a history, update, or summary from its negotiator on the status of contract negotiations. So history and updates isn't viable reasons for, so if we're going into an executive session, I'm a vote opposing it. But if we do, we need to stay on the rails, follow the letter of the law, do not have any updates, any history, any guidance that cannot be done in public unless there's an adversarial response to us financially. What I'm seeing, I'm not sure there's anything that can't be said publicly with regard to the second request for an or an executive session.
Okay, any other discussion? There's a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye, and related to the second closed executive session.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
All right, that motion carries. In executive session now. All right, it's 6:36. We're coming back from both of our executive sessions. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. Second.
Have a motion and a second. Motion by Chad Peterson, a second by Dave Eppinger. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.